Let's get started. Let's get started. Let's get started with the agenda.
Let's get started with the financial report.
Let's get started with the project updates. Let's get started. The purpose of our meeting today is to. The purpose of our meeting today is to. The purpose of our meeting today is to discuss the annual budget.
The purpose of our meeting today is to finalize the project plan.
The purpose of our meeting today is to evaluate the marketing strategies. The purpose of our meeting today is to. First up on the agenda is. First up on the agenda is. First up on the agenda is the discussion of our quarterly sales.
First up on the agenda is reviewing our marketing strategy.
First up on the agenda is the budget for the upcoming project. First up on the agenda is. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions about the new policy?
Does anyone have any questions or feedback?
Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Does anyone have any questions? Let's move to the next topic. Let's move to the next topic. Let's move to the next topic. Marketing strategies.
Let's move to the next topic on our agenda.
Let's move to the next topic. Quarterly sales. Let's move to the next topic. Can you elaborate on that? Can you elaborate on that? Can you elaborate on your proposal?
Can you elaborate on the challenges you mentioned?
Can you elaborate on the implementation plan? Can you elaborate on that? That's outside the scope of our meeting today. That's outside the scope of our meeting today. That's outside the scope of our meeting today. Let's focus on the current agenda.
That's outside the scope of our meeting today. We can discuss it separately later.
That's outside the scope of our meeting today, but I'll make a note of it for future discussion. That's outside the scope of our meeting today. What does everyone think about? What does everyone think about? What does everyone think about this proposal?
What does everyone think about Terry's option?
What does everyone think about the budget? What does everyone think about? Let's take a short break. Let's take a short break. Let's take a short break and reconvene in 10 minutes.
Let's take a short break before discussing the next point.
Let's take a short break and continue with the brainstorming session. Let's take a short break. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this strategy.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on this issue.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on the proposed changes. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Could you give us a brief update? Could you give us a brief update? Could you give us a brief update on the project status?
Could you give us a brief update on the market research?
Could you give us a brief update on your department's progress? Could you give us a brief update? Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up today's meeting.
Let's wrap up the discussion and decide on the action points.
Let's wrap up and summarize the key takeaways. Let's wrap up. Does anyone have any other business to discuss? Does anyone have any other business to discuss? Does anyone have any other business to discuss regarding the project?
Does anyone have any other business to discuss before we close the meeting?
Does anyone have any other business to discuss about the upcoming event? Does anyone have any other business to discuss? Let's schedule the next meeting. Let's schedule the next meeting. Let's schedule the next meeting to follow up on this.
Let's schedule the next meeting for project updates.
Let's schedule the next meeting to finalize the decisions. Let's schedule the next meeting. Thank you all for your time and input today. Thank you all for your time and input today. Thank you all for your time and input today. Your feedback is invaluable.
Thank you all for your time and input today. It's been a productive meeting.
Thank you all for your time and input today. Let's implement these ideas effectively. Thank you all for your time and input today.
Good morning, everyone. Let's begin our meeting. Today, we're focusing on our quarterly performance review.
I'll start with the financial overview. Our revenue has increased by 15% compared to the last quarter.
That's impressive. Our marketing campaigns have significantly contributed to this growth. However, we did face some challenges with product supply constraints.
Let's brainstorm solutions for the supply issues. Ideas? Anyone?
We could consider partnering with alternative suppliers to mitigate the risk.
Additionally, we should invest in training our staff to handle such disruptions more effectively.
Great suggestions. Let's explore these options in detail after the meeting. Moving on. Any updates on the Employee Engagement Initiative?
Yes, we've seen a positive trend in employee satisfaction according to our latest survey.
That's excellent news. Before we conclude, any other points to discuss?
I'd like to propose a review of our budget allocation for the next quarter.
Noted. Let's schedule a separate meeting for that. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Meeting adjourned.